Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today we are going to talk about cache. This video finally has come, and I was actually waiting for this video to do it because I wanted to understand more about cache and not how is it working, but how you can manage what is the best approach to work with FlutterFlow and cache and caching the data. So the caching the data is actually when you have queries from your backend. It doesn't really matter if it's Firebase or it's Superbase or Apicos. You can even do it with Apicos as well, which is great, as you all know that I'm an Apico lover. And I will actually test it today with Apicos, but the idea is the same. It's only, I will show you, but it's only about Firebase or Superbase or Apicos. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. The settings are the same for all the databases. And then the whole idea is that you query your results. So when a user visits a page, um, it will actually not query the database again if you are caching your data. And the whole idea is that when a user uh, lands on a page, right now, before the caching, when a user opens a page, it will actually load the data. Let's assume that we're talking about Apicos. So the user will actually load the data, and when the user goes to another page, it will actually and go back. Even if the user used the back button, it will still load data from the Apico. And this is something, this will turn out in a lot of unnecessary Apicos, and is the same for Firebase as well. Your users will have like a lot of reads of your database, and assuming that Firebase people have to pay for, or the consumers of the Firebase will have to pay for reads and writes. This is actually great, so I really encourage everyone to use the cache, because even like I said, even if it's an Apico, it will load better. What are the benefits? So there are two main benefits. First of all, it will load faster because once it's loaded, it is like instantly there. You will see it now. And then the other important part is for the reads of your database. As in Firebase, like I said, or even in the Apicos, you should not as little if you query as little queries, if you send as little queries as possible, it's better. It's the recommended actually approach of working with data. So let me show you how this works right now. I have this my own app, which is it's not an app, it's actually a demo app. And then we have this caching. So if I click on cache, you can see right now that this loads the cache. And I'm using the same data that I used before. It's actually a very simple data. It's coming from, I'll show you in a bit, but it's coming from a JSON file. It's an Apico. And then I have three buttons over here. So I have cache to, which is the cache data. So if I click the cache to, that you probably saw, that was loading the data. But if I click cache to, it will actually load the data instantly. And the reason for that is that the data is already loaded. And that's why if I use the same data in another page, it will actually load the data that is cached, and it will not query the Apico again. So if I click here, you can see that the data was instantly loaded and that there is no lag or anything like that. So if I go back, you again see that the data is instantly loaded, and the cache tree is actually not cached data. So if I click on the cache tree, we should see the data being loaded for like 1 second or less than a second. So if I click here, you can see the data. You probably saw that it was super fast, but the data actually loaded. So if I click again in 3, you can see it that the data is loaded. And the reason for that, like I said, is that here I don't use the cache, and this data is constantly loading. So it's constantly querying the backend, and the backend is actually returning the data, and that's why there is a little bit lag because of the loading. And now you can see, if I go back, now you can see that this data is loaded instantly. If I go forward, actually, you still see that this data is loaded. So you can this actually confirms my theory that even if a user loads the data in the page and then goes to another page and then go back or forward, it doesn't really matter, it will actually load the data again. So let me show you what I mean. If you actually go to, so let me just refresh that page, because I think I can only refresh it. And then I'll open my F12, which is the, yeah, probably I cannot refresh, right, because this session expired. Okay, but the whole idea is that I will going to show you how you can actually see the data being loaded. So let me see if this is going to load. So let me pass for now. Okay, so now this is loaded. And let me open F12. And when I open to F12 is the dev tools, and then go to network. So I go to network and I clear with this button. I can clear my network. It's this button over here. Then I can clear my network, and then I go to my cached page. So now notice that when I go to this cache page, it will actually load the data, and you can see that it's loading the data. So if I click over here, we should see that the data is loaded, and indeed it is. You can see the users, it's loaded, and those are my users that are loaded, and this is actually the page that is loading the users from. So you'll probably see the page in the comments on the description or in the GitHub. So yeah, it's a simple page actually. I can just show you real quickly. Is this one? JSON is JSON placeholder that typecode.com / users. Like I said, this simple JSON that will return users. And then what will happen when I go, so this is actually only users, because there are some other things for the flow. It's loading here in the meantime, but we're watching only for users because this is what I'm loading in those pages. So what will happen if I click on cache 2? If I click on cache 2, I should not see the user being loaded because they are cached. So if I click here, yeah, you indeed see that there is no other page that is loaded. So the data is loaded once and not anymore. So if I go back, it will happen the same thing. It will not load the data again. So if I click on the back button, you can see that we don't have another query to the API code, and the data is still here. So what will happen if I click on cache 3? And like I said, cache 3 will actually load the data. I'm not caching the data in cache 3, so we should see another code to the API code. So if I click over here, indeed you can see another code to the API code. And if I go back, I should not see another code to the API code because I'm caching the data. I'll go back to the main page, which is cache, and this will not cache the data. But what will happen if I forward? So if I forward to the cache 3, I will load the data again. So if I forward, you can see that I'm loading the data again. So right now I have 3. The initial one, I have the cache 3 loaded data, and then when I forward and went back to cache 3, not back but forward to cache 3, the data is loaded again. So how you can actually when the data is cached, how you can actually uh, uncache it, so to say. What if you want to actually update the data? What if you want the users to be able to update the data? There are actually a couple of ways you can do this. There are actually three ways you can do this. And the first way is to actually refresh it like that, like the normal, I think, refresh mode, which is to pull the data, to pull the list view, and this will actually force the data to be refreshed. In my case over here, I don't have any changes because the data is static, it's not changing. So that's why you don't see any data change. But this is how you can do it. Like I said, you can refresh it this way, like putting the data. Like I said, I think this is a normal refresh of the data, and you can see that the data here is being requested one more time. Another thing you can do is you can actually set a value, a boolean value, and when the boolean value is true, the cache data will be refreshed. And this will actually work, for example, if you want to refresh it like every day or every week or every year, or if something else happened, like some event in your app or something like that, it will be refreshed. And then there's the third way, which is you can actually clear the cache. There is a new action that will actually help you clear the cache. It will actually clear the cache. So if I click this action, nothing is happening right now, you can see, and that's normal. But if I go to page 2, which is the data, it should actually let me clear this and should actually request one more time the users, because I clear the cache and there's nothing in the cache. So when there's nothing in the cache, I should the code will actually request the new request to the API or the Firebase. Doesn't really matter, like I said. So if I click over here, you indeed see that it's actually requesting the users again. So if I go back and go to the cache 2, as you can see right now, it's not requesting it anymore. So this is how it works, and I hope you get it, how it works. So let me show you in reality how you can set it up. So let's go to my project again, and let's go to cache. And when I go to cache, this is the page. So I have like three pages. Like I have cache, I have cache 2, and I have cache 3. So let me begin with the first one. It's cache. So let me zoom a little bit. Probably it's better to see. And let me show you what is my setup. So my current setup is that I have here. So let me go to the list view. So because let's begin with the list view. So the list view, I have a query, a backend query, and like I said, this backend query can come from an API code, can come from a query collection, can even come from Agnolia search or document reference or Supabase or API code. All of them, I think, which are on the drop down. I actually haven't tried with Agnolia search, but I think if it's in the drop down, you still should be able to use it. And the pull to refresh is actually an option, and it is over here. So if you want to work with pull to refresh, then just enable this option, and the user can actually pull the data to refresh your data, to request the new data and not the cached data. And then this data will be cached again automatically. So this is how the pull to refresh works. It's very simple. Just click a button and that's it. That's why FlutterFlow is so powerful, because it's super simple. And then the query cache settings is actually, you can enable them from here. And when you enable them, you have a few options. So let me go through all the options. The first option is the scope. What is the scope of your cache. So you have two options. Either this is an app level scope or a page level scope. So when it's an app level scope, the idea is that you can use the same query in another, you can use the same cache in another page. I will show you how you can do this in the cache too. So that's why mine is up level. But of course, if you don't use this data in your other pages in your project, just use the just use the page level. If you use it only in this page or only in one page. And then we have the query name. So the query name is very important because we'll actually use this query name if you want to use this in other pages. So in my example, like I said, I use the app state, the app level, and then I'm using it in the I should use the query name to use this data in other pages as well. Or you can actually use it in the same page, which I don't think it makes any sense to use the same data in the same page. But nevertheless, if you have this setup and you have, for example, another list view that is actually using the same data, you can use it with the query name. So essentially the query name is how you can actually reach the cache. This is not the query itself. It is actually how you can reach the cache. You can actually imagine this as an app state, but don't define. But this app state is not defined inside the app state. It's defined over here, or a page state, of course, if you use the page level one. So yeah, like I said, this is very important, and you should have this for every single different query that you have. So this is one query, for example, and I have it for users. Let's say I have it for users. But if I have this for something else, so let's say that I made a video for ChatGPT. So if I click the ChatGPT one, I should actually have another query name because this is another query. Also, if you actually have filters to your query, so in Firebase you can actually have filters. So let's say that you have users or users data really doesn't really matter, and then I have filters here. If I have filters here, I should have, so if I have a list view and I'm using filters in the one list view and another list view, I don't use filters, for example, I use the whole collection. Those are two separated cachings, and because the results are different. So you can imagine it like that. If the result is different, then you need to use a different query name. So in my case, I have only one backend query in this page. So that's why I have only one query name, which is cached user. And then let's go to the advanced settings, which are optional, like they say over here, so you don't need to actually use them. And the settings are like this. So we have the unique key, and the unique key is actually you can imagine it. The unique key, you can imagine it for something that would be attached to the query name. So you have the query name, which in my case is cached users, and then you can attach a unique key. So this is actually a good example when you have when you actually filter a data, for example, or when you have a data that is user specific data, you can actually, if it's a user specific data, you can actually attach the unique key. It should be a unique key. It should be a value that is unique every time. And you can actually, if it's, like I said, if it's a user specified, then you can use the authenticated user and then the user ID, for example. If you use the user ID will be unique, and this will be attached together with the query name and a unique key. You have like unique value for each and every user, for example. But of course, it could not be attached to the user. It could be something else. It could be like, I don't know, it could be like, let's say, the global properties, and we can say we could make it if it's Android, for example. So we can make it like that. So if it's Android, then cache the data if it's uniquely, and if it's iOS, you can cache it as well, or if it's web, or it's not about caching. The data will still cache, right? If it's Android, it will still cache, but this will be like a unique value for your Android users. And like I said, this is done when you want to when your data is unique for, like I said, I think the user will be the most used one. So when your data it's specified for your users, then you can do it like that, authenticated user, and then you can use the user ID because this one will be unique. Or when you have actually filters, like I showed you, when you have filters, you can actually use the filter. I think you can use the filter data here to actually specify that, okay, this is a filtered data, and this will be unique data because of the filter that I'm using. So this is how it should be used. Um, I, there is a demo here, like for example, you can use the username and then the settings tab, for example. So like I said, if the settings return different things for different users, you can have here for the query name settings, and then you can have for authentication user, you can have the user ID. Yeah, I hope you understand it now. And then we have the should override cache. So should override cache is the third way you can override the cache, or you can force the app to override the cache and then update it and then request the backend again. And how this is done, it is actually, this should be true. This is a simple boolean and it should return true. And there is a very simple way that you can do it. You can actually have conditions, and then you have a single condition, for example, and then you can use the global time, which is this one, and then you can say if the global time, for example, it's greater than, and you can say the current time, but this time should come from somewhere, right? It should come from, let's say, for example, for page parameter or something like that. And you can actually say if this time is greater, then it will actually update automatically. The problem that I'm facing with this is that if it's going to come from an app or from a document, sorry, it will be updated as well. So let me show you what I mean. If I have, for example, you can set it up in this way, right? You can have the dates time, for example. Uh, you can have it if a date stamp, or you can have here if it's greater than the equal time, update the last updated time. So you should have a variable which is showing when it was last updated, when the data was last updated, and when the data is last updated, you can actually say here, get me the current time, which is coming from global properties, current time, and then you can actually say if it's greater than, and then let's say that this is actually coming from, it should, in my case, it's coming from the app state, but yeah, it could come from a document or parameter or whatever. And then this will be something like time. Do I have something here? So it should be the current time. Let me create a new one. So let me create a new one real quickly. So it should be the last updated. Probably I have that, right? So let's go to cache again. And then, okay, and then global properties, currently updated, greater than. And then I have, wait a second, I should have last updated here. Yes, I have the last updated. The problem with the last updated is that it is actually an integer. This returning an integer, and I think I have to convert because this is returning a datetime, and I think I have to convert it into. But let me show you what I mean into a daystamp, because this will not work if it's returning like that. So I actually changed my data type of the app state, and now it's returning a datetime and not integer. So when I click last updated, and you can see that if the current time is greater than last updated, then you can then when this is true, it will actually update the cache. So that's, like I said, that is a third way you can update the cache, and it should return a true value. So make sure that this is put over here. You don't need to actually um, you don't need to actually uh, return it or do it like any other way. Just this is the way. And if you want to the last updated, if you want to change this value, you can actually have a custom function, or sorry, an action, like a normal action, and this will update. Like here, for example, you can update the last updated, the time, and when you update the time, it will automatically update your cache. So yeah, like I said, if this boolean returns true, it will actually update the cache. And then we have the second way. So the first way of updating the cache will be to enable pull to refresh from the list view. This can be done only with the list view and not with a colon. And then we have uh, the clear cache. So like I said, this is a new button. It's a new action. When you click over here, we have the new action, which is clear cache. And then you can actually say which cache you want to clear. So it's a backend. Click over here, and then you can specify which cache you want to delete. In my case, I want to delete this one, cached users. And if you have actually a unique key, you can also specify the unique key for your cleared cache value. Okay, and then um, let me show you. So this is everything. Like I said, let me just go through the ways that you can clear the cache one more time, one last time. Like I said, enable to pull to refresh, it's one way. Clear the cache is another way. And overriding the cache is the third way. Okay, so let's go now to how I can use the same cache in another page. So if I click this button over here, and I have another list view over here. So this is cache 2, which is the cache website. So if I click the backend query, click on the query, the important part is that you need to have the same backend code. So in my case, I have the same backend code. I have apico users, and then in the query cache, enable the query cache again. Make sure you click the same scope. Make sure you select the same query name, and then you can actually use the cached data in another page. This is how you're using it. If you're using a unique key, you should select the unique key as well. But this is how you're using it. And now with this setup, like the same setup you did for the cache, it will actually use the cache data, and it will not, because it's seeing like, what is this request doing? And here it's saying that, okay, it's users. And then it's saying that, is there a cache for this? So it's like checking, is there a cache for the cached users? The name cache users, yes, there is. So okay, I will just use the cached data, and not I will not request the backend one more time. So this is how it works, and that's why I showed you at the beginning. That's why the cache tool will actually never never used or never query the backend, unless of course you have one of the trees ways to pull the data to refresh, or to click on a button as an action to clear the data, or to use the should overwrite cache. And then we have the third page. And the third page is not very interesting actually, because the setup for the third page is the same, and we have the same backend called again users, but the difference is that I'm not enabling caching to this page. So because I'm not enabling the caching for this page, it will actually never cache the page or never cache the query, and then it will load the query every time you visit this page, even if it's a back button or a forward button like I showed you. It will be sent, the backend query will be sent to your backend. So like I said, greatly advise you to use cached data for your users, so the data will be cached in the devices, and you don't need to actually send so many queries at the end of the day. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you learned everything that you need to know about cached data. I just wanted to tell you before we begin, sorry, before we go, I just wanted to tell you that you can actually subscribe to the live events every Wednesday, and yeah, make sure if you have any questions, go to the community and ask there. And I was your mentoring or guiding guy, Dimitar. So yeah, thank you very much for joining this video, and thanks that you made it to this far. 99% of the people actually quit the video before this part, so thank you very much and have a great day. Goodbye.